Thank you, Thomas. So Max Payne. Let's talk about Max Payne. Max Payne, the inspiration for that came from crime stories, crime movies, essentially. And you know, the story was structured with the movie 3-act structure. Film noir especially has always been something special for me. I wanted to bring that into this experience. You know, there is a flashback structure in the game. It starts from the end and then goes to the beginning, and we'll see how he got to this situation. Very film noir thing. Also, you know, if you think about Max as a character, he is this classic private eye, cranked up to the max, pun intended. And that's a kind of a character who gets beaten a lot, falls down, but always climbs back up, and never gives up. A stubborn guy. And that's a big part of what makes him a hero. Also, you know, with the tragedy there, he's driven by guilt. That's, to me, in these stories, guilt is a strong, strong motivation. You could say that this comes from, you know, Finnish Lutheran background. Guilt is a big thing, and stubbornness is very much a Finnish thing as well. So, as a genre convention, hard-boiled narration just fit in very well. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, I was worried going into Max Payne that there is so much gunplay and so much action. How do I get the story and the character to be heard? And my solution was, well, it needs to be all caps. It needs to be, you know, metaphor after metaphor, you know, shouting about the story in some ways. And everything is on a symbolic level, you know, about extremes, heaven and hell and gods and angels and monsters. And that's how the story, you know, the style was born in it. Obviously, the theme of broken family. In Max's case, sadly, it's a dead family, and because of that, the darkness inside, the internal conflict, you know, it's really extreme. And then how to bring that to the world around him. It's always nighttime in Max's New York. There is the worst winter storm in a century. So it's not really a real world. It's Max's way of seeing New York. It's noir York. The other great way of bringing the internal to external and building levels out of that, obviously, are the dream sequences. So I'll talk about the comic books in a bit, but this is obviously also about hard-boiled narration. Let's look at some of that.
I woke up in a bad dream. My head felt 2 sizes too small for my brain.
Max Payne, I envy your name.
And the killer was smiling.
Pleased to meet you. I'm Frankie the Bat Niagara.
Niagara, as in you cry a lot? He had a baseball bat and I was tied to a chair. Pissing him off was the smart thing to do.
Nothing wrong with a little laugh now and then. Take me, for example. I love to watch cartoons. Cartoon violence is a fascinating thing. Let's take a break. I need to take a leak and maybe grab a cold one at the bar. Don't worry. I'll be back to finish this off. And then, it's checkout time.
You play, you pay, you bastard. He swaggered out, and the door clanged shut behind him, locks clicking into place.
So, you know, we went with a graphic novel or comic book for storytelling. First of all, I'm a big fan of comic books, and that played a role in it. But also, if you go back to 95, 96, 97, and look at the cutscenes in the games back then, they were not much. And to tell a deeper story, to tell more story, that really wasn't an option. And with a comic book, you could actually do that. Also, you know, if you think about this exaggerated style of narration, comic books in themselves are kind of exaggerated. So that felt like a good fit. And finally, if you look at comic books, they are always very character-centric. So that was a match as well. The other thing that we used or started using here, just a small thing in the first Max Payne, but it keeps growing bigger, were the in-game TV shows. The first one was Address Unknown, with this idea of kind of this psychological thriller, if you will, of the dark side of the main character becoming real. And to me, that kind of is an echo and a twisted mirror to Max's own story, and the dark side, obviously, is kind of his guilt. The other thing that we did here for the first time is kind of blurring the line between these different layers. We have the TV show in the world, we have the actual world of the game, but they start to kind of merge in the sense that Address Unknown is a well-known TV show in Max's world, and the junkies in this world are kind of mumbling and repeating certain catchphrases from the show, like the flesh of fallen angels, and that gets a deeper, more symbolic meaning. Let's look at the Address Unknown episode. This is actually
The poet Poole, in his poem, "Somebody's Been Wearing My Face Again," wrote, "In this hall of mirrors,
Hey, we were watching that,
a
asshole."
pale reflection of myself. I had escaped from the Pink Bird Mental Institute. I was lost in Noir, York City. I couldn't find my way back home. John Mira had made me a killer.
Well, the dreams I already mentioned. It's a good question whether that's kind of internal becoming external or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. Dream logic is a great way to bring symbolism into the experience, and obviously getting inside the character's head, and also in some ways having fun. Maybe it's a kind of a bit of a postmodern thing, but I do love kind of playing games with our game story. Moving on to Max Payne 2 then. Many of the same elements, obviously, in Max Payne 2. Comic book, narration. What I wanted to do with Max Payne 2 was make it even more film noir. There is a flashback structure, but it's even more kind of complex flashback. The tone of narration was refined, and the themes, you know, and it all comes back to the fact that there are no happy endings in film noir. There is the idea of a broken family. Once again, it's kind of a love story that is doomed to fail. Doomed to fail unless you play through the game on all difficulty levels 3 times when you do get the happy ending. But that's also the fun part of making something interactive. And we brought in a lot more in-game television shows from different genres. They are all reflections of Max's story. The question is, are they really, or is it just in his head that how he sees the world around him, and everything kind of feels that it's commenting him in a way. And blurring the lines between the worlds, now Address Unknown is an actual game level, a funhouse game level where Mona is staying, that you visit several times, and Vinnie Gognitti, one of the mobsters, turns out to be a huge Captain Baseball Bat Boy fan, and you actually find him in a cosplay suit of the character, which becomes a story element as well. You know, one additional storytelling element that I have not mentioned yet is music. And in Max Payne 2, for the first time, we brought in music as an element.
And we keep driving into the night. It's a late goodbye, such a late goodbye. And we keep driving into the night.
It's a late goodbye.
Hey, hey!
NYPD. I need the code to the 7th floor door.
Yeah. So, music as a storytelling tool. We created Late Goodbye with the band Poets of the Fall. They are friends. And it's a hit song in the world, as you could see. So once again, we are kind of blurring the line between these elements, and the lyrics are thematically tied to the story. That was the starting point. In Alan Wake, we went quite a bit further with this, talking about Alan Wake. And actually, with Alan Wake, I think that there is a time for a costume change. This is a hot leather jacket, good for a winter storm, but